Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 96 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to go over my 2026 rookie wide receiver rankings ahead of the 2026 NFL Draft, which of course is later on this week. So I've got a bunch of names here at the wide receiver position that I want to discuss with you all before draft night, and how these players are going to fit into your Dynasty rookie drafts, what you should be expecting, who the top players in the class are, guys that I like more than others, etc. So before we dive into that, though, I want to remind you all, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're in everything out there, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it. So go make sure that you are following this show so you don't miss any future episodes. And find us on social media as well. So Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find our YouTube channel at Dynasty War Room. And we have a Facebook page as well. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Vcourt. So go give us a follow. We would be happy to interact, answer questions, talk fantasy football with you all. And especially here as we get into the draft. So end of April, the month of May as a whole, really just always full of Dynasty rookie drafts, which is such an exciting time of year. So hopefully this is our final pre-draft podcast. So we covered the running backs on last week's show, the quarterbacks and the running backs the quarterbacks and the tight ends, in the week before. And today's show, a little bit delayed, had a plan to record it over the weekend. Things got a little bit crazy here in real life, had to delay it a day. So here we are, ready to go, just a little bit behind schedule, but NFL Draft this Thursday night in Pittsburgh, and we got a number of wide receivers expected to be picked in the first round, which is really going to be the bread and butter of this rookie class. So we talked about the quarterbacks, pretty weak outside of Fernando Mendoza, and the tight end position has a couple nice names. Running backs, it's Jeremiah Love, and then a bunch of, middle of the draft type of players. So the wide receivers are really going to be the ones that lift this class up, give it some depth, and we got a lot of nice names to choose from. And I would say that right now I have a very clear top six that makes up my first, second, and third tier of the draft. And then I have a huge fourth tier of wide receivers. So my number 7 wide receiver all the way down to my number 14 wide receiver, to me, all fit in together in one big block. And then I have another tier of about 4 players in tier 5, followed by, kind of our best of the rest, your day 3 type of guys. I got 4 names in there. So I got 22 total receivers that I'm going to name drop on today's show. And so we'll kick things off right at the top with tier 1. And my number 1 wide receiver in this class, before I say the name, I want to preface this as this is a 3-man tier. So I do have 3 players all in tier 1. You probably know exactly which 3 because it seems like it's pretty much the consensus group of 3, but I do have them in a slightly different order. So Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver out of USC, is my number 1 wide receiver in this year's draft class. He is projected to go in the first round, probably somewhere in the early teens is what it seems like, somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. Probably could go as high as 7 or 8, but somewhere in that range comfortably. 21.89 years old. So we've got ages for draft night down to a second decimal, thanks to The Athletic. Dane Brugler released his The Beast, which is his giant prospect guide. It has all kinds of details and info on every single prospect, full scouting reports, his draft grades, etc. I find that to be a helpful tool, especially on the film side, to just supplement my more analytical research and the way that I typically approach fantasy football. So got some ages from him. We got his draft grades that we incorporate into how I make my rankings. So that's where we got the ages. He is 5'11", 194 pounds. Last year at USC, he had 79 catches for 1,156 yards, 11 touchdowns. He had a 90.8 PFF grade. And Mekhi Lemon is someone that I view as a very safe bet in the NFL, and I think he's a very strong bet for elite fantasy production. And so that's why I have him at number 1. I can understand why a lot of NFL teams would have somebody like Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson at number one, given their size and how they fit more on the outside in the NFL. Because Mekhi Lemon does have a ton of projection or production and projects as more of a slot receiver in the NFL. He's definitely more of a possession guy, a route runner. He's not somebody with elite speed or elite size, but he is somebody that has elite hands. He is able to find the open space in a zone. He beats zone at a very high rate. And he is somebody that, to me, you've probably, if you've listened to any other shows or you've done your own research of any kind, you have almost 100% guaranteed seen a comparison to Amon-Ra St. Brown for Mekhi Lemon. And that's because they play a pretty similar style of football. They're guys that you can trust to get open, guys you can trust to get first downs, you can find the end zone, great hands, just smart, gritty type of football players. And Mekhi Lemon is someone that really just excelled all throughout the entire season at USC. It's always been a good school for producing wide receivers, maybe not quite to the level of an Ohio State, but still, USC, definitely one of the better schools in terms of its output at the wide receiver position. And Mekhi Lemon, to me, just feels like he is the most trustworthy guy to get elite production in the NFL. He is somebody that can fit in on just about any type of team. He can be a quarterback's best friend if it's a younger quarterback. And look, there's a number of teams in this draft that do not have great quarterback situations that are going to be drafting wide receivers. You can look at Cleveland, whether that's at pick 6 or at 24. You've got the Jets with a couple picks in the first round. You've got Miami picking a couple times in the first round as well. So there's a number of teams that need wide receivers badly. They're going to draft someone. Might be a prospect you really liked, might be somebody that you're not as big of a fan of that you can avoid, but Lemon is somebody that could go to one of these teams and find immediate success, could have a role as a number one in an offense. But even if he's not necessarily the true number one on a team, if he goes to the Rams, let's say, in the top 15, that's a great fit. Sure, year one could be a little bit slow in that particular type of scenario because there's Devontae Adams still there. But next year and moving forward, you're talking about a guy going to a great offensive system, something along those lines. So I think there's a lot of different possibilities for him that make sense because he's versatile. He can play both inside and outside. He had some of the best efficiency numbers in terms of playing on the outside in this class, despite being mostly a slot receiver in college. And so, again, NFL teams play zone more often than not on defense in the NFL. It's usually about 70% of coverage in the NFL is going to be zone, and Mekhi Lemon is a zone beater. There's a few players on this list today that you're going to hear me really hype up for how they play against zone, and it's because of that fact that it is the most common coverage in the NFL. Now, obviously, you still need to be able to beat man coverage. Otherwise, you just become a one-dimensional type of receiver. There's one guy in this class that I'm a little bit worried about in that regard, so we'll get to him soon, but Mekhi Lemon, I think, can do it all. I am very, very high on him. I just think he gives you everything you want. He can separate. He can find. He's a good route runner, great hands. He is an elite yards after catch type of player as well. And so even though he's not the most explosive, he's not the most athletic guy. He's not going to burn you with his speed or anything like that. But he's a savvy, smart, just toolsy wide receiver that I think will do very well in the NFL. So because of his potential fit in a PPR type of scoring format, I do believe he can be someone that has a high volume level in the NFL. And so that pushes him up to number one on my list over the guy that I have at number 2 here in Carnell Tate from Ohio State. So Carnell Tate is probably the consensus number 1 wideout right now among the general fantasy football population. He's probably going to be the first wide receiver picked on draft night, and he comes from Ohio State, so big-time wide receiver factory, of course, and he's projected to be a top 10 pick. He is 21.26 years old, 6'2", 192 pounds, and last year at Ohio State, 51 catches for 875 yards and 9 touchdowns. He had an 82.9 PFF grade, and so Carnell Tate, elite at just getting open, being a He has the highest quarterback rating in this class in terms of when he is targeted, what his quarterback's rating is. He is just a guy that makes the plays. He glides. He's not really like an athletic freak. Again, both him and Lemon, neither one are going to blow you away with their athleticism, but he's a very smooth route runner. I think if you watched him at all this year, you probably picked up on that. He has long strides. He just finds the spot in the zone where he needs to go. He is solid against man. I wouldn't say that there's any particular receiver in this class that is overly elite against man coverage. It's definitely more of a zone-heavy beating type of class, which I guess makes sense and is probably good for today's NFL. But Carnell Tate is someone that battled it out on his own team with Jeremiah Smith, who is likely going to be a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft. So definitely a high level of competition over there at Ohio State. Obviously, even in years past, there were other talented receivers coming out of OSU. So that's kind of the one knock with Carnell Tate is he was always the number 2. He never really produced at a true number 1 type of level. So the question is, can he then blossom into the NFL as one of those true number 1 receivers? Because if you're going in the top 10 of the draft, I think the expectation is that you should be able to do that. Now, I think he has the skill set to do so, but we just haven't seen it given where he went to school. So Mekhi Lemon, we saw it. Jordan Tyson, we saw it. But Carnell Tate, we have not seen that from him. But I just think he's a very safe play again. So Lemon and Tate both, I think while having high ceilings, Tate to me is just a very high floor player. He's going to, get the job done. Again, very good hands and somebody that I think you will be able to trust as just an every week contributor to your fantasy team. So I worry a little bit about the high level ceiling. I worry a little bit as well that he could get stuck in a spot like Cleveland at number 6. I do think that would be pretty rough for his draft capital, or in terms of landing spot at least. Number 6 would be great draft capital, but going number 7 to Washington would be great. 8 to New Orleans, anything along those lines would be awesome for him. But even if he goes to somewhere like Miami, where I think the opportunity to be the true number 1, Cleveland, there is a number 1 spot wide open, but it's just an even messier quarterback situation, even when compared to Miami. So we'll get into more of draft capital and their actual landing spots in our post-draft rankings, our final set of rankings next week, where we take our just total overall top 24 among all positions. But Carnell Tate, somebody that will be locked and loaded into the top 4 or 5 of your rookie draft and Dynasty. I would have Mekhi Lemon as my 103 and Tate as my 104 as it currently stands. And again, draft capital, landing fit could very well change this if Mekhi Lemon falls to 20 and Tate goes top 10. It's something that we'll evaluate. But just on paper, based off some of the tape, the analytics at the moment, I was more impressed with Mekhi Lemon. But again, that's not taking anything away from Carnell Tate. I have them both extremely high. They're back-to-back in my rankings and overall. So very, very happy to end up with either one of those guys in a rookie draft. At number 3, and my final player in Tier 1, I do have Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State, currently projected as a first-round pick. And his draft capital has been kind of up and down a bit over the past couple months. Was started off high, then dipped, kind of gradually getting lower and lower. There are even rumblings that the injury issues could cause him to fall into the late part of the first round. Now, after a positive workout, seems like everything is trending back up in a positive direction. So he is a name that could very well end up in the top 10 of the draft. He is 21.69 years old, 6'2", 203 pounds. Last year at Arizona State, shortened by injury at the very end of the season there, but 61 catches, 711 yards, 8 touchdowns, 88.6 PFF grade. And Jordan Tyson is a name that was frequently talked about as the possible number 1 in this class. I think analytically, he absolutely looks very strong on paper. If you follow any more analytical or data-based analysts in this space, JJ Zacharyson from Late Round QB is somebody that comes to mind that I like. And he and his model, they have Jordan Tyson as the number 1 player in the class at this position, as just a very high-level performer. So take that as you will, as somebody, somebody that has their own model that runs sort of the advanced numbers in terms of how these players shake out. Very, very impressed with Tyson in that regard. For me, the couple things that stand out in a bad way. Number one, of course, it's the injuries, right? Everyone knows that Jordan Tyson has battled a series of injuries throughout college, missed a bunch of time due to a collarbone injury, torn ACL. He's had hamstring injuries. And I think the hamstring injury is almost the most worrisome of the bunch because it feels like it's nagging. He didn't, do a whole lot in terms of workouts and trainings and whatnot leading up to the draft after getting injured later on in the season. And I think there is some fear that he's just one of those injury-prone guys. I'm not worried about the collarbone. Things like broken bones are really more just one-off type of things. It's more of the ligaments, the soft tissue stuff that can repeat. And, hamstrings are something where even if you talk redraft, when we talk redraft rankings and whatnot in the summer, every single year I have to remind myself, anybody that is dinged up to begin the season, especially with soft tissue injuries like hamstring strains and pulls and whatnot, avoid those guys in your redraft leagues because they're just not going to be the same player for that year. So I am worried that it could be a bit of a slow start for somebody like Jordan Tyson, despite the fact that he is still young. He won't even be 22 on draft night. He's got elite level production starting at a young age. He began his career at Colorado before transferring over to Arizona State, where he, after missing his full sophomore season, bounced right back with an elite third year in college there at Arizona State. So love the production. He is somebody that struggles a bit after the catch. He's not somebody that's going to make a lot of guys miss or force tackles. And he is somebody, though, that you can draw plays up for. He is a solid route runner. I wouldn't necessarily call him a very explosive player either. He's just another one of these guys that gets open and can, good hands and the huge levels of production that you really like to see at the college level. So I would be very happy to have Jordan Tyson on my teams. And if you are picking out of the 105 spot, I would feel very good about taking him there. I think if he gets elite draft capital, he goes in the top 10. You really like the landing spot. I don't have any issue with anyone bumping him up to the 103 spot. I currently still am of the opinion that Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana would be the number 2 pick in a Superflex draft. Obviously, in a single quarterback league, you would slide Mendoza way down the list, and you'd be talking Lemon, Tate, and Tyson in some order from the 102 to 104 positions. So that should give you a pretty good ballpark for just how I view those 3 players. I like them all. They bring a little bit different type of style of play. All 3 of them a little bit different, but still very productive for fantasy, and I think they can be wide receiver 1s in the NFL. So let's move on to tier number 2, which does have 2 players in it, and at number 4 is probably the biggest riser in this class, and is somebody that I was going to be higher on than most as we started the pre-draft process, and then everyone else kind of caught on, and that is Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. He is currently projected to be a first-round pick. He is 22.36 years old, or will be on draft night, and he is 6 foot, 199 pounds. Last year at Indiana, 69 catches for 937 yards, 13 touchdowns. He had an 87.4 PFF grade. And Omar Cooper Jr. is somebody that is probably going to draw a lot of Deebo Samuel type comparisons because he is elite with the ball in his hands after the catch. You get this guy the ball, he's going to make players miss. I heard an insane stat the other day in another podcast, and I believe, again, late round QB to give the plug, but Omar Cooper Jr., if you take the plays that he made, 0 players missed tackles, and the plays where he made 2 guys or more missed tackles, it was the same percentage. I believe it was about 33% of the time for each. So a third of the time he makes 2 or more players miss tackles. A third of the time he makes at least 1 player miss. And then a third of the time the first guy gets him. That is an insane stat. That is an awesome number. We love to draft players that make players miss tackles. It shows agility, shiftiness, the ability to pick up extra yards. And so he is one of those guys that he's got good size. He's got good speed as well. He did run a 4.4 at the combine, and at 6'1", 199, he's got really ideal size for what I think is kind of the modern trend in the slot. He can play outside, and I think that's something that helps him as well. Very versatile player. He played outside fully in his career, essentially, until this past season when he shifted more into the slot. And he is the guy that I wanted to mention as one of the elite zone breakers in this class. He shreds zone coverage. And so if you're talking about a guy that you're going to put in the slot that can make guys miss, he has good speed with great hands. He's one of these players that if you watch, a lot of people end up just watching highlights on YouTube of various players, but if you watch all 22 film or you watch entire games, etc., you can get more of a feel for how some players produce. But Omar Cooper Jr., you see some of the highlights with the body control. He does that all the time. He's, the hand-eye coordination, very strong. Everyone that pays any attention to college football will probably remember his game-winning touchdown catch in the back of the end zone against Penn State. When Fernando Mendoza came down in the final 2 minutes, he got the crazy toe tap in the back of the end zone right along the line, and he is that type of player. And so I think that there's a really good chance that Omar Cooper Jr. ends up in the top 20 or certainly top 25 in the NFL draft. He seems pretty solidly into the first round at this point, and is somebody that I will likely have a lot of on my teams because I have him currently as the 106. I think there's a three-man tier right now for 106 to 108 in your drafts. It's likely going to be Omar Cooper, KC Concepcion, and then Sadiq over at the tight end position. And so depending on the draft capital and the landing spot, et cetera, those are the three guys I see as kind of my 106 through 108. And they could change. They could certainly change order if one player goes higher than another by a significant margin or something along those lines. But Omar Cooper Jr. is somebody that I want on my teams and is somebody that I'm excited about. There are some drawbacks. This is not all positive. He is a bit of a late breakout type of player, which ideally you would have more early career production. This past season was really his true breakout as a senior. He did have some solid production as a junior, especially where, like I mentioned, he played more on the outside. So that versatility, I think will be very important for the NFL because we see a lot of these guys that fit into this more slot heavy role in college, but then they can play both in the NFL. So I think Mekhi Lemon fits into this. I think that Omar Cooper will fit into this. And I even think that KC Concepcion will fit into this as well, who we're going to talk about next. He's interesting because he actually did it the opposite way, where he played more on the outside this year at Texas A&M, whereas before, early on in his career at NC State, he was more in the slot. So again, that versatility is going to be helpful for all of these guys. And so Omar Cooper, I believe, will end up in the first round and will be somebody that you can take in that 106 to 108 range in your rookie drafts. Right behind him in my second tier is going to be KC Concepcion out of Texas A&M, also projected to be a late first round pick. He is 21.58 years old, 5'11 and a half, 196 pounds. Last year at Texas A&M, 69 catches for 919 yards and 9 touchdowns. PFF grade 78.4, and he is somebody that is very, very, very close to Cooper Jr. in my rankings. I like both a lot. I actually was a bit pessimistic about how I was going to view Concepcion early on in the process. He just wasn't the typical type of receiving prospect that I'm that interested in. I was viewing him as, he's just a smaller guy, drops the ball a lot. Is he going to be relegated to the slot only? But the more I looked into him and the more I found out, it was, hey, this guy is a great athlete. He is an elite separator. So if you've listened to the show for more than just the last couple weeks, you will know that when it comes to wide receivers and the prospecting, I do care a ton about your ability to separate. And Casey Concepcion is an elite separator. He is a good route runner. He's explosive. His negative is that he does drop the ball. His hands are not great. Technique could be a bit better, but he does the most difficult thing well, which is get open. And so I do think that he can separate at the NFL level. I think he can play outside or inside. We mentioned that versatility given that he's played all over the place in college, early declare, so we like that. And so I think that draft capital will play a big role into whether Cooper or Concepcion are higher in my rankings. On paper, I like Cooper, but Concepcion does have more of that early career production that I like to see. He also has the separation. He performs well against man coverage. So I like both players a lot. They are in the same tier for me in tier 2. They're the only two players in tier 2. And I think at the 106, 107 spot in your draft, I don't think you're going to be able to go wrong with either one of those guys. At number 6, and in his own tier at tier 3, I have Denzel Boston out of Washington. So he's currently projected to go late first round, 22.38 years old, 6'3.5", 212 pounds. Last year at Washington, 62 catches for 881 yards and 11 touchdowns. He had a PFF grade of 88.0. Denzel Boston is a big-bodied receiver, right? 6'3.5", 212, but he is not just one of those vertical receivers that relies on contested catches alone and can't run routes or anything like that. I don't think he falls into that mold of player. I think he actually is a good route runner. He has good hands. I think he doesn't necessarily have quite the same ceiling as some of these other players, but I think he has a relatively high floor and is somebody that I will be very comfortable drafting around the 109 spot in rookie drafts. I think he is sort of the last wide receiver that I would feel excited about drafting, which, it's great that we have 6 players and I'm excited about taking at the position, but for a class that has been talked up a bit about the depth of the wide receiver position, I don't know that the middle class in this group is quite as good as what people think. So we'll get into that in a minute, but Boston, I think, then represents a very important player in the draft because it's sort of the last true potential like blue chip guy. So he is a player that I will be targeting if I'm picking in that range. And he has, of course, been at a very good program in Washington. He has played with a lot of pros over the past few years. More of a bit of a later breakout over there, but he's a red zone threat, as we see with the 11 touchdowns. And, he can catch the ball downfield. He does have good hands, like I mentioned. And I think he's a much smoother route runner than people might give him credit for. I think a lot of people just looked at him and went, oh, another big dude. He's just going to stick around, stick him on the outside and, run go routes and that sort of thing. But I don't think that's his game. There are other players in this class that will be that style of player where you just stick him on the outside for, the random deep shot throughout the game. But Boston, I think, is somebody that can play a bit more over the middle. I think, to me, he's kind of a poor man's Rome Odunze, which could be an easy comparison because of the college jersey. But I think he's a similar style player, just with a bit weaker production. So that's kind of the way I see Denzel Boston. All right, so now we get into tier number 4 at the wide receiver position. And this, like I mentioned at the top of the show, is a huge tier for me. So players number 7 through 14 all fit into this same tier. I think that every single person's rankings are going to be different from this point on. You're probably going to get a lot of similarity in terms of their 1 through 6. I think, some debate about who's number 1 or 2, and then some debate about 4 versus 5. But generally speaking, everyone's got the same top 3, the same 4 through 6. And 7 is where things get really interesting. I struggled a ton with who I would put at this number 7 spot because I think that there are players that have a higher floor that might be safer. I think there are players that have high ceilings but very low floors. In fact, I think there are a bunch of players that fall into that tier. And then I have a guy that I think has a solid floor and a solid ceiling. In fact, my two players here at 7 and 8, I don't know that either one necessarily has the highest of high ceilings, but I do think they have solid floors with some traits that can be fantasy relevant. And so, again, I'm doing this for fantasy football rankings, not for who will fill a specific role on an NFL field, etc. And so, at number 7, I do have Elijah Surratt out of Indiana. Currently projected to be a third-round pick. He's 22.9 years old, 6'2", 207 pounds. Last year at IU, 65 catches, 830 yards, a class-leading 15 touchdowns, and a PFF grade of 86.1. So, Elijah Surratt, there's a couple huge positives and at least one, probably two huge negatives. So, I'll start with the negatives. We'll get the bad stuff out of the way first, because you probably just heard me talk about how much I value separation, and now you're going, how can you have Elijah Surratt at number 7 if you care so much about separation? And it's a very valid question, and it's largely because, well, I don't like a lot of the other guys on this list either, but Elijah Surratt will struggle with separation in the NFL. He struggled with it in college. He is somebody that's not going to get a lot of space from defenders, but the counterpoint to that is that he is arguably the single best player at contested catch situations in this class. So he was nicknamed the Waffle House in college because he was always open, and he is somebody that excelled on those back shoulder throws with Fernando Mendoza. He was a first down chain mover, and he was really the number one receiver on this Indiana team for back-to-back years. He's transferred around a couple times. He started his career at small St. Francis, transferred up to James Madison, and then followed Curt Cignetti over to Indiana. And he's been an elite producer his entire career. So he's definitely got that for him. The other negative, I think, is that he's not a great athlete. He does have good size at 6'2", 207, so that's really ideal size. But he's not a burner. He ran a 4.5. His 10-yard split was a little bit slow at a 1.6. So he's not necessarily the quickest or fastest, but he is a very smart player. And so talking about some of the more positives for him, he is one of those players that you look at play and he just does everything right. He's somebody that I think coaches will like. Despite his trouble getting separation, he is elite against zone coverage. So again, we talked a lot about that ability to beat zone, and Surratt can do that. And so while he may struggle against man, he's definitely got the zone coverage part down. But he has good footwork. He is somebody that has good hands, and for his separation, his inability to separate necessarily, he is still a good route runner, and he does find the soft spot in the zone. So similar to some players in prior years that might fit into this type of bucket, I do think his best role in the NFL is as more of that big power slot type of player. He played a lot, he's versatile. He played inside and outside in college. I think he is a good fit for one of those more versatile roles in the NFL as well, as long as he still gets a pretty sizable amount of slot play, because I do think he would represent a pretty nice mismatch when it comes to going up against zone coverage out of the slot. He's not going to beat NFL corners downfield on streaks. He's not going to be that type of player, but he's going to be more of those underneath, mid-level passing game, first down, chain-moving type of players, and I think that has a role for fantasy. Teams are going to like that. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be a number one receiver in the NFL. I think more of a team's wide receiver 2 is probably what he's looking at. Frankly, most of the players in this tier would be lucky to end up as wide receiver 2s on their teams, is kind of the way I see it. And so both Elijah Surratt and then the player that I have at number 8 are players that I think will be more of just steady producers. And so despite some of the negatives, like I mentioned, the separation definitely going to be an issue because the statistics just don't show him being somebody that got away from defenders at a great rate. But he has great hands, and he's able to box players out and make good catches, that sort of thing. Contested catch, like I said, very high rates. So it's a bit tough to say. Surratt could absolutely be somebody that if a team just sticks him on the outside and they never put him in the slot or they just don't put him in the right position, he could easily be a player that we just look at and go, you know what, was a very good college player, but just couldn't cut it from an athletic standpoint in the NFL. But I do think if a team drafts him, hopefully in the second round, but it could be the third. He's projected now in the third, so it's been trending a little bit in the wrong direction. So if he does fall to the third, more than likely he will drop several spots in these rankings. But I'm hopeful that he can be a second round pick, which would signal to me that a team would be planning to use him the right way and would make him much more fantasy relevant. So Elijah Surratt at number 7. At number 8, I have Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama, currently projected to be a second-round pick, 22.39 years old, 6'1", 206 pounds, 64 catches for 862 yards and 7 touchdowns last year at Bama, transferred over from Washington with Kalen DeBoer, and had a 71.9 PFF grade this past season. So Jeremy Bernard, the way that I see him, and this is probably the way that he's been described everywhere, but he is good at everything and elite at nothing. So just a good all-around player. He can play, he's versatile. He can, play in the short game. He can go deep. He can run, gadget type plays, take a couple handoffs. He can do a lot of things. He's a solid athlete, not an elite athlete, but certainly not a poor athlete. And he's just a guy that I think is going to be reliable. Just one of those steady wide receiver 2s on his team in the NFL that will give you the occasional, good week for fantasy. I don't know that any of these players necessarily, like I mentioned, are going to turn into these stud weekly all-stars for fantasy football, but Bernard should be a player that lasts a long time in the NFL, that a very capable player that you can probably put down as like a flex for your lineup. That's kind of where I see these guys fitting in. And of course, had some production at Alabama, and then had some nice production early on in his career at Washington. Was clearly a player that Kalen DeBoer trusted, bringing him over from Washington. So he's got some, some credibility there with the schools that he went to, and his coaches certainly wanted to get the ball in his hands, which is always a good sign. That means he's a playmaker, that kind of thing. So, but I could see a situation where at this point in the draft, you might be wanting to aim for more pure upside as opposed to more of the relative safe play that is Bernard. So that's where a couple of these other names that are going to follow him in my rankings could, with their draft capital, end up higher on the list. It's just at this point in the process, there's too much up in the air. I try not to take too much risk too early in these rookie drafts. But there are a number of these players that I think are more boom bust that we're going to get into now. So 7, Elijah Surratt, 8, Jeremy Bernard. And at number 9, I think still in tier 4, again, this whole big group of tier 4, we shift our archetype a little bit. So we go from more of the safe possession style receiver to the outside X receiver, going to play on the outside. And we've seen these types of players just be all over the place in terms of what we really get in the NFL. So at number 9, this is where I'm going to take my upside shot. I'm going to go with Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, projected as a third-round pick at the moment. He's been getting some late buzz as well, could end up sneaking it around 2, which would be nice. And he's 21.81 years old, 6'4", 206 pounds, 71 catches, 1,004 yards, and 6 touchdowns last year at Georgia State, 82.0 PFF grade. And Ted Hurst is somebody that very high ceiling, very low floor, started his career at Valdosta State. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but not D1. So played at a lower level, played well there early, and then transferred over to Georgia State, where he had back-to-back great seasons. He absolutely has the size that you're looking for. And I think that's what is very tantalizing about somebody like Hurst at 6'4", 206. He's going to be below age 22 on draft night, so that's very nice as well. And he is a player that I think could use a little bit more toughness in his game. I think that's where the struggle is going to be, is making that jump from playing at such a low level all the way up to the NFL will come into play. But he has the traits. He's got good athleticism. He's fast, big, strong guy. I think it's just a matter of, can he adjust to the competition level in the NFL? And will there be a team that is willing to spend up on him in the NFL draft into the second round? Because I do think there's going to be a number of third round guys that are, pure like lottery type picks at receiver. But if you can go in the second round, I do think that's going to be something that will separate some of these candidates in rookie drafts for Dynasty. So Ted Hurst, Georgia State, comes in at number 9 in my rankings. At number 10, Chris Bell out of Louisville. He is currently projected in the second round, and 21.88 years old, 6'2", 222 pounds. Last year at Louisville, 72 catches, 917 yards, and 6 touchdowns, 81.8 PFF grade. And Chris Bell is a big, strong wide receiver. He's more of that thicker type of player and a powerful receiver. And I think one of the big worries here is that he is going to be coming off of a major injury in his rookie season. So he tore his ACL at the end of the season. He's missed this entire pre-draft process. And the fact that he is still projected as a second-round pick is pretty great for him. And I've seen things kind of all over the board for him, because if he had stayed healthy, we could be talking one of these late first, early second type of guys. Now I think we're probably talking more late second, early third. But my big fear here is that if you think about this practically, okay, you draft Chris Bell in the second round of your rookie draft, and then he misses the first 2 months of the season, or he's slow getting up to speed. He has not been able to do anything in the offseason, no training camp, etc. I do wonder if then his draft, like his stock, his market value just drops a bit naturally, even though I think people should be drafting with the expectation that year one is essentially a wash. So if you're one of those like true rebuilding dynasty teams, that's where I think somebody like Chris Bell would make more sense for you in the second round of a rookie draft than, say, a contending team that is looking for immediate production. Because I just don't think he's going to do a lot as a rookie, but he is another one of these boom-bust type of players that if he can hit and be an outside X-receiver, he's good with the ball in his hands, and he's got good size, speed combo, and so that's where he kind of fits into me. But again, the injury, definitely a big concern, and the NFL is going to tell us a lot. I think if he still goes in the second round, it will signal to us that they really believe in the talent, and that a team is willing to overlook the injury and kind of wait it out. Whereas if he falls into the third round or, even all the way to the fourth round, that's where, he should probably fall in your rookie rankings a bit to more than likely the back half of the second round, just because I don't know that he's going to gain or even hold his value with a, subpar first year. At number 11 is Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. So transferred over from Tulane, and he is currently projected to go in the second round. 22 and a half years old, 6'4", 198 pounds. Last year at Tennessee, 62 catches for 1,017 yards, 9 touchdowns, 79.4 PFF grade. Now, Chris Brazzell is another one of these just intriguing, tantalizing size, speed, outside X receivers. On the flip side, he also went to Tennessee, which is notorious for having these receivers enter the NFL that simply don't know how to play wide receiver. They bust all the time. And unfortunately, Chris Brazzell looks like he could be kind of next in that line. So I am very skeptical. He pretty much only played on one side of the field in college. He's an outside guy. He's not somebody that's going to do a lot underneath, over the middle, etc. He's more of the big play type of guy, and he probably needs to put on a little bit of weight at 6'4". And my big fear here, and this is reflected in Dane Brugler's draft guide with his grade on these players. He has Chris Brazzell marked as a 3rd/4th round prospect. Everybody else that we've talked about up on this list has either been in one of the first 3 rounds. So, this is where we kind of fall down a little bit. In fact, I even have a few guys later on that are projected to with higher grades, according to Dane Brugler. And this is more of if he hits for fantasy football, he can be very good. But I am very skeptical of his ability to succeed in the NFL, both given the style of play from Tennessee And we've heard a lot about character concerns for Chris Brazzell. He is somebody that I don't get the sense that he is always all in on every play. Sometimes he takes some plays off when he's not getting the ball. I just think that it wouldn't shock me if we see a draft day slide for Chris Brazzell. So while he's projected in the second round because, hey, he's got good numbers, he's got good size and speed, but if you factor the Tennessee offense into the character concerns, I do think it is very possible that he could fall into the third or fourth round of the NFL draft, potentially even later. I don't know if he'd necessarily fall all the way to the fifth round, but I'm a little skeptical that he's going to go in the second. So that's definitely going to be a storyline and something to keep an eye on in the draft, because if he does go in the second round, then absolutely, this is going to be a player that you're going to look at in the second round of your rookie drafts. And it's going to be very difficult to say no to a 6'4" outside receiver that has blazing speed and had 1,000 yards last year in the SEC. So, that's the flip side there. So definitely a polarizing player, definitely a boom-bust prospect in my eyes, but the boom is tantalizing enough to have him at number 11 in my rankings. Next up, we're switching gears and going all the way from an outside slot or outside X receiver to an inside slot receiver in Antonio Williams out of Clemson. So currently projected to be a third-round pick. He's 21.77 years old, 5'11", 187 pounds. So definitely a size difference there compared to the last few players that we've talked about. But this is more of a true slot player. Last year at Clemson, 55 catches, 604 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The year before, he was more productive. He does have some good early career production at Clemson as well. So that's definitely good to see. He got on the field early on in his career. We definitely love to see that. His PFF grade last year was an 80.3. So definitely a solid all-around player. He's under age 22, so that's a positive. And this is a guy that, draft capital is going to play a big role here, but if he goes on day 2, he'll be somebody that I think is very interesting in the back half of the second round of rookie drafts, and maybe even in the mid portion or early portion of the second round. It just kind of depends how far up he truly goes. But good hands, a good route runner, somebody that can definitely get open, and a type of player that unfortunately probably would have been better in the NFL like 5 or 10 years ago than now. We're starting to see the slot rate drop a little bit in the NFL. And so there have been a number of players in recent years, and even in this draft, that are profiled more as slot first players, but they also have the versatility to play outside. So think Mekhi Lemon, Omar Cooper, those two in particular stand out, Casey Concepcion, etc. But those three guys in particular can all play inside and outside. Antonio Williams, to me, is almost purely a slot-only player, so I do think that definitely limits his upside in the NFL. So that is my big concern there, is can he be versatile enough? Can he be on the field enough to have a big impact for fantasy football? I definitely think he's a skilled player, has some talent, and will definitely be a player that I think sticks around for a while in the NFL. I just don't know how high the fantasy ceiling is given his positional limitations. All right, so at number 13, we have another Bell. So we have Skylar Bell out of UConn. So transferred over to UConn from Wisconsin, and he is projected as a third-round pick right now, according to the mock draft database, and 23.8 years old. So an older prospect, that's definitely a negative. 5'11" and a half, 192 pounds. And he is somebody that has some versatility inside, outside, but his size, again, wouldn't shock me if he gets stuck in a bit more of a slot role, but he can do both. So he's definitely got the versatility that we want. And his production in his final year at Connecticut was insane, which is good because he was an older player. As a senior, you want to see that strong production. And 101 catches for 1,278 yards, 13 touchdowns, 81.6 PFF grade. So elite production out of Skylar Bell at UConn this past year. He's a very good athlete, very explosive. He had good, speed the 40-yard dash at the combine, good drills, positional, and the explosive jumps and whatnot. So very good numbers there. But I do think that he's a little bit unrefined when it comes to some of the route running and that sort of thing. Now, I think playing at a smaller school certainly can impact that. If he were just a little bit bigger, he would probably be, right up there with like a Ted Hurst in my rankings, but he is a little bit undersized, and so that hurts him a little bit. But I am always going to be drawn to those players that just have monster production in college. Now, the age is going to be the negative, but 100 catches for nearly 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns is still really awesome production at the FBS level. This is not like he was some FCS, Division II type of player. UConn was still playing a D1 schedule, and so that's impactful. And he had production at Wisconsin too. It wasn't like this is a player that didn't play at all and then transferred. He had a couple nice years at Wisconsin. Was a solid player in that offense. Was never necessarily their number one, but a good player, a guy that definitely got on the field in the Big Ten. Had between 30 and 40 catches for a couple years. So he carried that over, and then had the huge explosive year this past year. But I'm going to be drawn to that. He'll be a player that I will enjoy targeting, probably at like the 2-3 turn area in drafts. And I think that's going to be a nice spot to take a flyer on somebody like Skylar Bell. Now, my final player in Tier 4 is going to be Notre Dame wide receiver Malachi Fields. Currently projected to be a third-round pick, 22.66 years old, 6'4", 218 pounds, 36 catches for 630 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, 75.8 PFF grade. Malachi Fields, 36 catches is simply not going to get it done. So the lack of production is a huge red flag. He's not a good athlete. He ran a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash. I think that he kind of is a one-trick pony. I think he's a deep ball guy, which can have a role in the NFL. We just saw deep ball guy Alec Pierce get a huge contract. And so teams do look for this archetype of player that can stretch the field. I do think he's going to be one of those guys that just runs a lot of cardio, but he's got solid hands. He can definitely make some nice catches. Spectacular catch rating in a video game might be pretty high, but I just wonder if he's going to ever have the volume needed to be a true fantasy asset. And so he's going to have to be used differently in the NFL than he was in college, which could happen. He's got good size, and he had some better production at Virginia before transferring over to Notre Dame. So it's not like he, this was simply his best season and that was it. He does have some prior production, so it's not like it was nothing, but he's not a good separator. I think he is going to struggle against NFL defenses when it comes to separating, and I don't think he's pegged as like a, one of these true zone beaters and that sort of thing. So I do worry about how he gets open. I worry about the production translating, and so he's probably a player that I'm going to be largely out on, but he is still somebody that does have that high ceiling if he can get there. I just am very skeptical that he can reach, that ceiling level play. All right, let's move on to tier number 5. And given that we are almost an hour in, I will go a little bit quicker here through some of these last names because, number one, there's just not as much to say. And two, these are probably guys that you're going to be looking at in the 3rd and 4th rounds of your rookie draft. So let's start with my first player in tier 5 at number 15, and that is Jacoby Lane out of USC. So we got another USC wide receiver, currently projected to go in the 4th round. 21.71 years old, 6'4", 200 pounds. Last year at USC, 49 catches for 745 yards and 4 touchdowns, 77.6 PFF grade. He is an early declare wide receiver out of USC. So Jacoby Lane, definitely one of these big body outside X receivers. It's a bit unfortunate almost that he left school early because I do think he would have benefited from another year at USC, would have probably pumped up those numbers pretty good without Mekhi Lemon around to, soak up as much of the offense like he did. But still, I think, being an early declare is helpful for his profile. He definitely has good size. Not exactly an elite athlete, but not a poor athlete either. And so he is somebody that Draft capital is going to tell us a lot. If he can sneak into day 2 and be a third-round pick, that would be huge. I think that would push him up into tier number 4 for me. But as it stands now, if he does fall to day 3, he'll be somebody more of that I take a look at later on in drafts as one of those, more deep threat, big body, red zone type of guys. But very much was overshadowed by Mekhi Lemon in the offense this year. And I don't think he projects as a number 1 type of receiver in the NFL either. Definitely more of a number 2 type of player. But somebody that is definitely on my board and, with a good landing spot and capital, could move up a spot or 2. At number 16 is Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. Third-round pick is his projected draft capital, 22.07 years old, 5'8.5", 177 pounds. So that's a huge red flag right away, 5'8.5", 177 pounds. 82 PFF grade last year, and he actually had a really nice productive season at Georgia. 81 catches, 811 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And the downside to Zachariah Branch is twofold. One, of course, it's the size. We talk about that. The 5'8", 177. This is a slot-only player. And number 2, a huge percentage of his production in college, I want to say it was like about 30% of his receptions and whatnot, came on screen passes. So this is not a guy that you can, go down the field with. This is somebody that you get the ball to behind the line, and you just hope that he can make players miss, make things happen. And he is fast. He does have some agility. He is the type of player that you would want in that gadgety type of role. But I just don't think this is a player that wins for fantasy football. He will be more valuable to an NFL team in real life than he will be to your fantasy team. He is not going to be a guy that ever goes out there and averages, 7 catches a game and gives you 1,000-yard receiving yard seasons in the NFL or as a red zone threat or anything like that. This is a smaller player that relies on manufactured touches. He's the better athlete version of a Malachi Corley. That archetype of receiver just does not work well in the NFL. Now, if any of these type of players were to do it, Zachariah Branch could be that type of guy. He was a 5-star recruit out of high school. He went to USC, transferred to Georgia. So, big-time colleges, a good athlete, that he's got that prospect pedigree and whatnot. But I'm just so skeptical of this type of player that I don't particularly care how good of an athlete he is. He's just not somebody that I'm going to draft a lot, and I'm going to leave him for those drafters in your league that rely on the big names that they recognize from college because he probably fits that role. But he's just not somebody that I think is going to be that helpful for your dynasty team in the NFL. At number 17 is Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State, currently projected as a late third-round pick, 23.67 years old, 6'3", 204 pounds. Last year at North Dakota State, 51 catches, 1,079 yards, and 8 touchdowns, and you get an 89.3 PFF grade. So if the name sounds familiar, it should, because this is Trey Lance's brother. So also played at North Dakota State. And Bryce Lance is going to get a lot of comparisons to Christian Watson because he is another one of these big, fast, deep threat type of receivers. So very good athlete. He's definitely got good size. And he had nice production this past year, reaching 1,000 yards. But he is an older player. He's already 23, almost 24. And he did nothing in college for the first few seasons, which would be one thing if he went to, a Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, etc. But he went to North Dakota State where, you're not in Division I, you would expect, or you're not an FBS, I should say. And so you would expect that a player that is NFL caliber as a third-round pick should be able to get on the field sooner. And it just didn't happen. So we just don't see a lot of success stories for players that follow this type of path. So I'm not saying he can't do it because he does have good size and speed, but I'm, a bit skeptical. He's a player that maybe if he falls to me in the right spot in the third round of a draft, I'll take him, but not somebody that I'm going out of my way for. I just think he's an interesting dart throw or lottery pick late in rookie drafts. Next up on the list, and the final player in Tier 5, is Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. Fourth round pick is where he's projected to go. 23.29 years old, so another older prospect. That's a red flag. 5'10", 180 pounds, so another undersized guy. 57 catches for 620 yards and 4 touchdowns, 64.1 PFF grade this past year. So this is another guy that is very fast. He is somebody that, can take the ball on screens. And he actually, I think, is a bit more of a playmaker than Zachariah Branch. I think he can do a little bit more down the field. But I worry about the size. I worry about the age, being 23. He didn't have elite production, but he did make plays. He was a good college player. Again, too much is working against him with the size and the age, that he's probably a player that, maybe if he's there for you in the 4th round, if he is fortunate enough to go in the 4th round of the NFL draft, I think that could make him a 4th round rookie pick. But, if he falls to the 6th or 7th round in the NFL, he's just not a guy that I'm going to be that interested in, and NFL teams will have shown they're not either. At number 19, and kicking off a 4-man tier in Tier 6, Brendan Thompson out of Mississippi State. So this is the 40-yard dash guy this year from the combine. Ran, I think it was a 4.2 something, and so that got him some name recognition. Projected 4th round pick. He's 22.75 years old, 5'9", 164 pounds. So way undersized. He's definitely a slot receiver. 57 receptions for 1,054 yards and 6 touchdowns. So we do like that. He definitely had some really good production at Mississippi State. So I think he does have some of the versatility too. I don't think he's necessarily slot only, but 79 PFF grade. He's a player that I'm fine with taking in the 4th round. Again, he's got the speed, so maybe he can finally be the player that tests well and is the combine king and then does something in the NFL. We haven't seen a lot of that success, but this is finally at least a player that fits that mold that's not going in the 1st or 2nd round. Or talking, a 4th round rookie pick. So for that cost, I'm fine. But again, the size, he's not going to ever be like an NFL wide receiver 1 or even a wide receiver 2 for that matter. He's really more of a wide receiver 3 prototype for the NFL. So we'll see what happens. But Brendan Thompson checks in at number 19. At number 20, Dazon Stribling out of Ole Miss. Projected 4th round pick, 23.35 years old, 6'2", 207 pounds, 55 catches for 811 yards and 6 touchdowns last year at Ole Miss, and a 79.2 PFF grade. So this is, in my eyes, he's kind of like a poor man's Trey Harris. Same school, older prospect, got good size, has some production, but I just don't really see it with him. He transferred around a bit. Ole Miss was his 3rd school. I believe it was Washington State and then Oklahoma State that he played at before. So he has some early career production, which is nice, but I just don't know that he has the juice to really be an impact player in the NFL. But again, a player that's been getting some steam up draft boards recently, and so if he can sneak into the 4th round or better, somebody that should at least be on your board. All right, now my final 2 players. At number 21, I have Kevin Coleman Jr. out of Missouri. He is a projected 6th round pick, 22.62 years old, 5'10", 178 pounds. So again, pretty much a slot-only player. 66 catches for 732 yards and a touchdown, 78.5 PFF grade. This is a guy that had some early career production that I thought was a little bit interesting, but he's an undersized slot-only player that didn't play super well against high-level competition, so just not really a guy that is going to do a whole lot in the NFL. I would be surprised if he gets very good draft capital, but interesting enough that, hey, undrafted free agent, 4th round flyer, that kind of thing in your league, perfectly fits that mold. At number 22, and a player that probably also fits that mold, is Eric McAllister out of TCU, projected to be a 7th round pick, 23.42 years old, 6'3.5", 210 pounds. So he definitely has good size. He's a good athlete. 72 catches for 1,190 yards and 10 touchdowns with a 76.1 PFF grade. So really good production out of Eric McAllister. He's got good size. The big negative Number one, is his age. He's already 23 and a half. And then this is another player that I think has had some off-the-field character concerns and whatnot that will certainly hurt his draft stock. So we'll see exactly where he ends up. Hopefully he will be drafted at least, because I think that can make him an interesting flyer again in your fourth rounds. But the character concerns could be enough to drop him out. There's a few guys. I think that the three big names for fantasy that we've heard in terms of character concerns, it's Chris Brazzell, Eric McAllister at wide receiver, and then Michael Trigg at tight end. So that's a name that we talked about in the tight end rankings that I liked a decent bit. He's in my top 8, and we could see him falling quite a bit in the draft and could bump him down the list. So just something to keep an eye on there. But I think from a size and production standpoint, he definitely is interesting. So Eric McAllister checks in at number 22. All right, so there you have it. Over an hour into the show here, but we got through 22 wide receivers and got this out here before the NFL draft on Thursday. So a lot of big names. Of course, these rankings will definitely change post draft. So across all the positions, everything is going to change a bit. But that's why we love the NFL draft. And draft capital definitely plays a big role into our rookie rankings. So we will be back on after the NFL draft with our final rankings. And so we will have that. We'll be working on that on Sunday after the draft, and we'll likely publish that on our normal schedule of first thing Monday morning. That way you got some rankings and some NFL draft talk to listen to on your way to work on Monday morning. So there you have it. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. My voice is slowly fading away here, but I appreciate you all tuning in and sticking it out for another big show here. And let's get ready for the NFL draft. You have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast. My name is Andrew Valancourt. Thank you all for tuning in.